we've got another Ask an Expert today, and the topic is today on integration. So unlocking the full potential of finance data and a bit of decision making as well. So next slide, please, Ryan. Okay, I just want to run through a few housekeeping things just before we do get started. So if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to use the raise hand tool or type your question in the chat box and we will get back to you. I'd also just like to ask if everyone could please remain on mute throughout the presentation, just so that no one's interrupting Ryan while he is speaking, but we will, of course, get to your questions if you do have anything. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will introduce you to Ryan today, who will be taking you through the session. We don't have Mark on today, but I'll be checking the chat box and making sure that if any questions do come through, Ryan can get back to you on that. So off you go, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Gemma. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Almost Easter. We're going to talk about mostly integration today. So the topic of this was on unlocking your finance data, and the text was really describing integration, but the questions we've had come through, which have been a lot, are all about integration. So I'm going to focus on integration for most of this, but as Gemma said, feel free to put questions into the chat or unmute yourself and we'll ask questions as we go. Now, let's look at this integration concept first. So the very first thing is people ask about why should we integrate? You know, what's it all about? And the question I'm going to ask is, if you as a project manager, how do you know what your project actually costs? So Gemma's going to start a poll up, and we're going to see what you think, or where you think the actual cost of your project comes from. Okay, I'm going to see if I can see it on my other screen here. No.
I can read you out the results, Ryan. So at the moment, we've got 50-50 on finance department, tells me, and 50-50 on I manage the finances.
All the financials yourself. Okay, well, that sounds like people are doing a lot of hard work. So finance is telling you you've got to go off and you've got to find out and you've got to type that data somewhere. And secondly, if you're managing it yourself, there's probably a spreadsheet involved. And of course, there's always a spreadsheet. Nothing wrong with a good spreadsheet. But it again means there's a bit of double handling. So we're going to talk about how we can smoothen this whole process out. And if you're on the project manager side of the fence here, we want to make your life easier. So let's think about now, if we've identified there's some manual work going on. You're here hopefully because you're thinking of integration, or you think integration is of interest. Why are you considering integration? So what do you think integration is really going to do for you? So let's look at the second quiz, and we'll get Gemma to actually read this out again. Interesting, my other Teams window is coming up saying I don't have permissions to share the results. So I don't know what's going on there.
That's okay. I can again read out the results. I'll just wait till a few more come through. We've only got 4 responses at the moment.
Oh, come on. There are over 100 people signed up for this. So I'm hoping you all joined, because I can't see the number joined. But
okay, so 100% of people are saying too much time spent double handling and collating their data. So that
is a very interesting one. And the implication of that generally is that they're errors. So you spend a lot of time. We do have some clients who spend up to a day or two a month just dealing with getting the financial data through, getting it to a format they can report, and then often there are errors in there anyway. And this has to be collated layer by layer up as it goes up manually to higher levels. Okay, so not having integration creates extra work. Let's reduce that work. Now, when we start thinking about integration, we do then start running into this concept of the finance view of finance department's view of finance and the project manager's view of finance. There are some questions around this. And these two things, there's a bit of a love-hate thing usually going on, a bit of a tug of war here. They're not exactly the same view of finance. The finance department really is there to support the CFO. It's there to do that roll-up reporting. It's there to understand things from a true fiscal focus. So they're looking after the overall investments, and are you, as an organization, they need to track finance in a particular way. they're not necessarily interested in the project, and they're not necessarily interested in the way you think about a project. So a project may be focused on what they've spent so far and what's left as of now, where finance is thinking of it, well, I've got a much bigger view. I'm worried about it monthly or quarterly or something like that. Project is thinking about, I'm doing a piece of work with a vendor. I'm buying a widget, and I need to break it down to that level of detail. Do I have money left in my training budget, for example? From finance's perspective, like, yeah, project, whatever, we chuck them all into one bucket, sort of blend the costs up. It's okay. We don't need to go to that level of detail. The project may be thinking, well, I'm being measured on my whole of life on the project, where finance is only worried about a particular financial year. Okay. There's a timeline difference between these. So very often a project is worried about when they're physically engaging that vendor. They don't really care about when the cost itself goes through. So there are different views here. There are also often very often different systems in place. The project system, like the Alta system we have, or finance system, SAP, Tech One, etc., and they are set up for different purposes as well. So this is not simply just a case of, hey, share the data and it all happens. There's a bit of sort of tension between these two. And if we look at this a little bit further, we have to start thinking about the different roles that are focused on money. So what are these fiscal roles we need to satisfy? Well, the CEO is after trustworthy data, rolled up data, and overall financial position. Are we spending the right money? Maybe we're doing it by strategy, maybe related to strategy, maybe by portfolio, and more interested in, are we liquid or not? Coming down a level, the CFO is now worried about the detail. They're coming into the portfolios and they're thinking, using that portfolio data to understand cash flow. So ultimately, they start splitting things up now, CapEx, OpEx, etc., and they're worried about, how keeping the revenue office happy. But this is still pretty high level. When we come down to the PMO, they're now worried about governance of the delivery, and they need to make sure that data is actually trustworthy. So they're looking really inwards, and they're trying to understand. This is where the timing starts coming in, where the CFO's cash flow forecast may not actually line up with exactly the way the PMO is governing things. And then underneath this, we come down our layers, we can have program or portfolio managers in place, and they're worried about a slice of the budget. So budget recut, where from a cash flow perspective, it's more, hey, OpEx or CapEx, I'm worried about labor overall. The fact that Bob, Mary, and Jane have sliced this up into their view of what a program should be is of less interest to the CFO, but is very much the way that that program manager or that project manager is being measured. So suddenly now we've got a different set of KPIs coming in place, and this creates a bit of tension. And their project managers now right into the detail. They just want to know what their budget is and when they can spend it. They need to forecast out, and they want to save time in getting that actual in there and getting a consolidated view of everything. So we have different roles with different focuses here. And when we think about the integration, we need to look after the project manager and the PMO manager, of course, but we do need to recognize that some of the reasons why integration becomes hard is because when you talk to the higher levels, they're asking for something that doesn't necessarily translate to what you're able to give them. Okay, so now there was a very interesting question that came through here, which was assuming that financial information, your budget, your forecast, your actual, is done in the finance system anyway, what do you need the project system for? And I was like, that's a pretty fundamental question. And it comes back to this concept of saving time. So how much time are we actually able to save here? If we want to make sure there's one source of truth for the project manager to go to, so they just go to one spot and they see absolutely everything. Don't want them going to two different systems. We want to make sure that in saving time, you're also reducing error. So two systems means I've got potential for error, so I've got to transcribe things over. And ultimately, you've got to think about where is the project, the consolidated project reporting coming out of. If I've got all the other project data, so I've got the status, the risks, the issues, etc., but I'm missing the financial piece, well, now I've got to go and do two different things. So it's a bit harder. I've got to manually type it in, and that's what takes time and more error comes in. So using a tool like an Altus in this case, does for you is, well, you want those consolidated financial insights. So I want, this is very small, but you'll get the concept on there. You want a view of the financials across all the projects. Well, to do that, the project manager needs to be able to go in without double handling and maintain probably a budget and a forecast. And we will talk in a little while about exactly what they need to maintain. Actual has to come from somewhere. So let's assume the actual is coming in from finance. But there's more going on in a project than just a simple view of budget, forecast, and actual. What about, in the interest of saving the effort, which we've seen as a major theme for project managers, spending a lot of time on things here? What about all the labor costing? So I have another item, which is resource planning. So I've got a resource plan there, so I'm planning out labor. Well, wouldn't it be nice to have that in the same system and have these integrated together? So my financial view automatically just consists of non-labor and labor costing. And then what about those actuals? So we said, yeah, we get them from finance, but they could be a little more tricky than that. What about if we have timesheets involved? Wouldn't it be nice if timesheet actuals could, since I planned out that labor anyway, that gives me a forecast, timesheets data could come into my financial view and give me a truly integrated view of everything. So this is what the project system can do that the finance system can't actually do. And this is why we look at pulling integration through. It's not about these two things competing with each other, which is what a lot of people seem to approach it as. It's about how can I give you one view that you can trust that saves the project manager and the PMO time, but giving them just one pane of glass, one screen to go to, and all that data comes in from finance and the rest of the project system or systems, if you're doing spreadsheets, etc. Get the resourcing in there, get the forecasts in there, get the timesheet actuals in there, etc. Okay, now, so if this has kind of sold you on the idea of integration, you could say, Ryan, here's a bag of money, go forward and integrate my finance system, please. And I'll say, yeah, sure. However, let's talk about some of the details. So what we're going to do is we're going to start getting into what the actual detail is here. So there's another poll. And this is going to be potentially interesting. What do you think the hardest part of setting up integration would be? So if we have to go and set this up for you, where's it going to get tricky? We're going to get Gemma to read out the results again, please, Gemma.
Okay, so at the moment we're sitting at about 60% are aligning the project manager and the finance views. We've got 30% getting access to the data in finance tools and 5% are working with finance.
That's interesting. It's not exactly what I thought. I get a lot of, I suppose it'd be unofficial commentary around it's hard to work with finance. So we're not going to integrate. So I'm actually quite glad that that's working well. But aligning the PM and the finance view of money, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a lot of this, like the process. This getting access to data in the finance tool can very often be tricky. There were a lot of questions that came through around just it's the technology. So can we get access? Can you integrate to X tool, Y tool, Z tool? And I'm going to talk a bit about the technology as well and how this is not a technology problem anymore. So we probably had 10 different people ask, can you integrate to their flavor of finance tool? It's not the right question to ask, actually. Integration needs to be a business project. As we've said, so I don't know where the number ended up, but the majority of people, it sounded like, are saying the hard part is integrating the finance view and the project manager view of finance. That's a process question. So we need to focus on the process. Technology just follows. And the modern technology means this is actually not hard to deal with. So when people ask me, and they always ask me, can you integrate to XYZ tool? It's not the right question. The question needs to be, what is the process we will go through to actually make sure the business process is lined up? I assume the technology will work. So why is it safe to assume the technology will work? Well, because we're in the future. So we're in the modern cloud world. Now, a lot of us on the call are probably been doing this for a while and have memory from the days when you had servers and big server rooms and IT departments and all this type of stuff. And it was physically hard to get hold of data and hard to move it around. Well, these days you're in the cloud. And cloud services are built for integration. So project tools are in the cloud, finance tools are in the cloud. They've set it up specifically to integrate. Because they're in the cloud, something gets forced, and that is standardization. So you can't all have a completely different implementation of finance or a project tool, for example. There's a level of standardization you're just forced to have because you're in the same cloud with everybody else. IT industry's caught up as well, and there are now APIs, there are interfaces in place to be able to interact with these tools because they anticipate integration. In the old days, 10 years, 20 years ago, I've been doing this for a while now, integration was actually the rarity and was expensive. So it was kind of like you were quite luxurious if you had finance integration. But these days, 80, 90% of our clients integrate to finance, and then a lot do other things as well. So there are APIs in place for it. So how does it work? Well, we have the cloud, so it's not an issue. We need to get data from finance out. Finance tools already they're all able to either spit a file out or give us an API, an interface we can talk to, or they're able to put it into a data store. Some have a data lake, a Snowflake, something like that already, and we can just go and get it there. So your finance tool, unless it came from the 1900s, will be able to get data out. That's not a problem. The format of the data, and is it meaningful, is a different question. We'll come to that. Us getting it in is actually pretty easy because it comes out standard. We have, on our side at least, we have Microsoft tools. So Microsoft gives us all these out-of-the-box tools that are able to connect to APIs, to databases, to pick up files, etc. And we can just pick it up and shove it in, okay? So the technology is not an issue anymore. It's all about the process. So getting into the depths of this in circle here, in the red circle, is kind of where the magic happens. So we have a bit of an air gap here, sort of, as in the cloud up in the air. You have your external system being your finance tool. We can get data out via some sort of connector. So you can get data out via an API, etc. As I said, there are industry standard ways to do this. It's not a problem. They all work in the same way. We have staging tables in the middle. So what we do is we get this data, we map it to where it needs to go. So this is the process, or where this is what you see a project as. We need to map it to that. This is how you do actuals. We roll them up, maybe add the transactions up, write them in over there. From there, they automatically just flow into where they need to go into Altus. So because of the way it's been built, we are relying on these out-of-the-box approaches from Microsoft, these modern ways of doing things that all tools have, so not an issue anymore. And in our case, we've built our tool to expect the integration to happen. So therefore, the question of, hey, can you integrate X, Y, Z is always yes, because we know it's going to happen by an industry standard anyway. Once we get inside it, it gets even more interesting. So depending on what you're integrating or the complexity of your integration, we have quite a few options. So if the end goal is that tiny little picture you see there is a finance report, we want a nice consolidated finance report. How do we get to such a thing? Well, we need to set integration up. You have, as I've said, industry standards. You've got APIs. You can spit files out. The good old CSV file, so common. Like I know this is 1990s technology, and it's everywhere, and it just works, so no problem. You can have a data store. We have tooling in place to make the integration even easier. So we have process or workflow that can actually connect or pick up your data, can check that there are no problems, so they can write errors. It can then import it in, and it starts then looking at it in detail to say, what are the items? So do we have a travel cost, a hardware cost, a software cost, etc.? And it then looks at the detailed transactions and then puts them into the staging tables, and from there it automatically flows into the rest of Altus where it needs to go. So what this is essentially an integration engine that's in place that actually does part of the integration for us. So it becomes easier and easier because there's so much sort of scaffolding in place to help us with this that technically not a problem. It's all about that process though. So if it's not about the technology, what is it about? What is this process? And what is the process we go through? Let's look at that. Having done lots and lots and lots of integration, we have worked out there is a basic process we go through, and there's essentially 4 steps. Step 1, and this is where the tension with finance can come in. Step 1 is agree on the source of truth and what data you want to see. And you have to talk to finance with this, okay? Usually the first workshop we have is we get in a room with finance, and then there can be a bit of tension because they're like, hey, what do you mean you want to know about costs? This is our stuff, we hold this. And it's like, no, we get everyone to understand. It's about surfacing the source of truth in the right place, but that source of truth lives for certain finance data always and forever in the finance tool. Okay, so there's no problem there. No one's creating an underground view of finance over here. We then need to understand exactly what we want. The most common thing people do, and there were some questions around, do you just do actuals? What do you actually do? So we'll go into that later. But actuals is the typical starting point. Okay, so you need to agree on what you're going to get, because finance may have they may have actuals, they may not have or care about other things. Maybe they don't want to know about forecasts, for example. You then need to actually map out that process. So it's like, hey, if this comes in, where is it going to turn up inside LTIS? Where is it going to turn up inside reporting? This needs to be reporting driven. You aren't bringing it in to save time and creating reporting. You then need to look at the level. So do we just bring one number in for a project? And some people do that because that's what their finance can do, and that's the level they manage to. Some are breaking it down by things like OPEX and CAPEX. Some are breaking it down based on cost breakdown structures, etc. So it depends on how detailed you want to go and what time slice you actually need, how often you're actually getting this data. And then you don't want to go and boil the ocean. You want to keep it really simply. So start simple. Integration means that I actually have to manage and report my finances properly now. So if I've got actuals coming through from finance, actuals are actual, they really happened. That means I should have a forecast that matches that. But if I'm not really great at forecasting, or I never forecast, I just kind of don't do it, suddenly my reporting has got me showing 0 forecast, but $100,000 actual in this month, I'm going to look really bad. This is a maturity question. So keep it simple. Match what you expect the project manager to do to forecast, to manage and report on the finance to what you can get from finance, and what step 1 is. Hey, we can get them to do a forecast once a month. So let's do that. And then later we can make it more and more advanced as we go. Now, those levels we were talking about, this is where we need to think about it a bit further. So if we want that reporting, so we want nice consolidated reporting, project manager is going to have options. They can maintain a budget, a forecast, they can get an actual coming in, and ideally it's about that actual that flows in. So there's $2,200, there's $2,000, etc. by month. Where did that come from? Well, sure, it comes from finance. But this is where we get to another question here, was our finance tool has all these detailed transactions. It's way like every invoice coming in, and deeper, we don't really need to track to that level in the project system. Project managers don't go to that level. What do? Well, we look at the time phasing of it all. We look at the level. So finance is usually going to be breaking it down in different ways, but this is a common way. They'll have a ledger. They'll break it down potentially if they're doing it to a project. Assuming their view of a project is the same as your view, they'll break it down to accounts. They'll then break it down to transactions. We can pull it in at any level. We have a lot of clients who send all the transactions through. But as long as we can understand, okay, this is the level. The project manager doesn't want transactions. They want the account level. So I want to know it's the hardware budget or hardware cost, for example, and we can identify the project we can roll up. So that's not an actual problem. This is what the mapping on the whiteboard is all about, is working out what level it is. And this is also where you start seeing the difference in one side's view of finances versus the other. But it's not a problem as long as on a whiteboard you can map it down to say, this is what we actually need to see on the project side, and this is where we would get it from if we had access to assume all the finance data. Okay, then it's a matter of seeing what finance can bring out for us. So to answer that question, it's not a problem if they give us a lot of data. We can always roll up. What we can't do is roll down. So if finance only tracks to the project level, which some do, and they don't then split a project further down into accounts, so their account is sitting higher, in that case, we can't magically roll it down. So that obviously becomes a problem, but this is why it's a process question. Okay, now, we can have budgets, forecasts, actuals, etc. What have you got in terms of your integration already, or would you have? I'm expecting people to, so this is cumulative. So if you've got just actuals or you're thinking of just actuals, go for actuals. If you're doing forecasts, which could go either direction, include forecasts. Some are pulling budgets through, some are pulling even more. Purchase orders and things like that are coming over from finance. So I'm interested to see what you would either have, you answering from the perspective of what you've actually got, or what you would potentially like if you had a chance to get hold of this. Gemma, how are we looking?
Okay, so we've got about 15 responses. 20% are saying actuals, 7% are saying forecasts, 27 on budgets, and then 47 are on the rest.
Okay, so a lot of you actually are going for everything. So it's essentially a full view of all the finance. That's interesting. Anecdotally, I would say that most people, when they set it up, do tend to go for actuals. It's a good starting point. But if you can get, again, it's about saving time. So if I can have as a project manager one place to go, and we have clients who are putting the actuals through, of course, some send forecasts to finance. Some budgets depends. It depends on, do you send them the budget or do they send you the budget? We have third-party tools doing budgets sometimes. And then things like purchase orders, etc. A lot are raising them in the project tool or requesting them, sending it to finance, getting the actual purchase order back. And the same for invoicing, depending on what type of industry you're in. Okay, so let's look at this. So there were some questions around this now. So one question was, what finance system can integrate with? Yeah, okay. But so anything is the answer. The question though was, what levels are there? Like, am I forced to integrate certain data? The answer is no. It rarely comes down to what do you need, what will finance give us? And even if finance gives you everything, they give you all these levels of information, they give you the entire tree, all the transactions, the lot, we don't have to take it all in if we don't want to, okay? Not until you're ready. The second question was, how does the Altus integrate with financial systems like SAP? Sure, so I think we've covered that. But would it be able to provide forecast figures back to finance? So yeah, absolutely. And we'll have a bit of a look at that. So what are things that typically happen? One is budgets. We have a lot of clients start the project, and this is where it's a part that's also true. So where does a project start its life? A lot are creating a budget in the finance system. So they create the project and a budget in finance, in the project tool. Some though create it in finance and then say it gets to a point where it's approved, so it's top down now, and then it gets sent to the project system. And it's all about then creating the project ID. So where does the project ID start? And is it going to be the same ID or does it get mapped over? So these are kind of like hidden parts of that you've got to think about when you're thinking about integration. Then we get to what usually happens is actuals. So putting actuals through happens pretty much all the time. But it doesn't necessarily end there, okay? Because what about the forecasts, as the question is? We have no problem sending forecasts across. Think of it from the perspective of, and I'm just going to, now the intention is not to do a whole, where did my Altus go? So I had this open, but then I must have somehow closed it. The intention is not to do a whole demo and try and sell you something, but it is to just quickly show you this concept of, if I've got an actual, I have to have a forecast because I have to put that actual against something. So if I just go into a project quickly, there's our financials. Okay, so I'm going to, a cost. A cost is a coin with two sides, so forecast and actual. So when I create a cost, let's say it's OPEX construction, it is, I'm building a fence, for example, and I have all these transactions. So essentially, I've got to put the actual somewhere. So it's got to come onto the fence cost. In doing that, I automatically have a space for a forecast. So I can create a forecast. What I'm then able to do is send that forecast somewhere. So I can definitely send it to finance. It could be as a cash flow forecast, or some people looking for. Some are looking for just give us the numbers. We'll turn it into a cash flow forecast, whatever we want on the other side. So yes, to answer the question directly, we can send it over. We don't need to do all levels either. Some clients are doing things like purchase orders. So this can come from either direction. Some we just read purchase orders in from the finance system and they appear in the project system because there's just a visibility thing. I don't have to go to two systems to see things. Others, we actually create a purchase order or request in the finance system, goes to finance, comes back with the actual purchase order number and the confirmation. Some are also doing budgets. So suddenly now we are looking at sort of budget reviews. So as we go through, maybe quarterly, you're reviewing the budget, you're changing budgets. So it's not just that the budget is set permanently. Okay. So the answer is, yeah, pick your level. It all comes down to the process that you're actually working to. So if you're going to do this, what actually makes up the effort for the integration here? I've said that it's not that much of a technical problem anymore. It isn't. It's mainly a process question. So we need to think about, well, we're going to have to actually set up your specific process in the technology. So there is some work to do over there. We need to then make sure that we have a screen, as we'll look at it in a second, to maintain those forecast actuals and budgets. In the Altus case, you have that out the box. You might need to make some changes. You may need to add some fields you need to track by, etc. You might need to, depending on what you're bringing in, you might need to think about reporting. So in an Altus case, there's all this reporting that's in the tool anyway, but maybe you are, let's say purchase orders you're bringing in now, or you're dealing with contingency, for example, and you want these things appearing on reports a particular way. So don't forget to update your reports. There is also then a very common thing these days of trending. So I'm bringing all this data in from finance. Wouldn't it be nice if I could actually write it away as a history and then show trending? And this could be for things like just show me how we are changing over time. We have some people who actually look to see, is the project manager changing their forecast every month? So actual comes in, they quickly change their forecast to match it, okay? It's a good trick to get a green traffic light. But they write away the forecast, so to see what you originally said in the beginning of the month versus how you ended up at the end of the month. And they've got this history. So these are all the things to think about in addition to just standard integration. But where should you go? Should you do absolutely everything? Well, no. This is very much a maturity journey. So as we kind of come towards the end, I'm going to show you some stuff in a second, a bit of a demo to answer one of those questions. But it's all about do it step by step. So step one, so just surface data in the reports. So just get data into the reports so project managers save some time. Now there's this whole integration story I've been telling you here has been about actually setting up integration to move data from finance to Altus and then have it in the reports. There is another way. And the other way is what I like to think of as poor person's integration. This is to use a report to go to both systems, get some data from the project system. Power BI does this well. Get some data from the finance system, bring it all together. It's integration, just in another form. When we start looking at the integration, maybe just start project level totals. So if you need to start to keep it simple, for the project, this is the total forecast, budget, and actual, okay? Then start breaking it down to OPEX, CAPEX, and further if you need to. So start, as you come up in the maturity, break it down more and more and more. And then, but you're still on the project level here. Do you go below the project level? Do you start tracking costs on the task level? This gets really complicated. This is good for building space shuttles. Okay, we don't see much of it these days anymore. And at the same time, you start thinking about, well, am I going to bring purchase orders in, commitments, etc. And it's when you start adding this sort of more detail, you're thinking about how did we estimate in the first place? You know, how do we build up that forecast? How is that turned into my request for a purchase order, etc.? And this leads to another question that someone had, which was, how do you do estimation and contingency? What I'm showing you here is just a screenshot. I can't show you this live. It was set up specifically for a client. But what they're able to do is pre the project. So it's a pre-project. They're able to build out, and let me see if I can, wait. They're able to build out estimates, so multiple estimates, and they're able to, as part of this, define what is actually in there. What is that cost? So what are we forecasting? In this case, what's the costing and what are they selling? So there's a revenue component to this as well. There's a markup component. It's linked to where it came from. So what suppliers involved, what work order, what finance category. In this case, they've got different currencies involved as well. So it's not just an estimate, it's an estimate that's linked into a context. So think of, we've got a cost breakdown structure or work breakdown structure. It's linked to that. So you're able to actually have some control around it. So it's like a bill of materials essentially, and a bit of standardization around that. That then builds up the estimate, which is giving us our forecast, and we're able to then move forward. As that then moves into the forecast, we can then change that, of course, as we go through the project itself. But yes, to answer the question, it's not, whoever asked this, is actually true that most project management systems don't do this well. They very much either top down, so just, hey, what is your forecast? Just tell me or type it in, or they bottom up with tasks. So when scheduling used to be the only way to do anything, it would come up off the task and that gets complicated. But there are options now. So within Altus, we can add this in as an enhancement. There are definitely options to build out an estimate, and that then leads to the forecast. Okay. I'm going to show you just a little bit of stuff here, which is answering this question of my finance tool has a project module. Can't I just use that instead? What do I need to do this integration for at all? But before we get into that, Gemma, is there anything in the chat that, any questions we've kind of got in the chat there that we should look at?
No, it's all good.
Okay. So I'm guessing someone's answering those. Okay. So the question of, I've got a finance system with a project module. Why can't I just use this? This actually comes up quite a lot. Well, answer number one is, if I am a project manager, so it's where our project manager hat now, I want to be able to save myself time and effort. I want to have this ability to go to create a status report. And for those of you already Altus users, forgive me for this, but you're going to see some stuff you already have. So we can have status on my project, which is the tenant renewal project in this case, and I want my finance data to come through. I don't want to go and retype things. So if I've got a project module, yep, I can go and get exactly this view out of the project module, but I have to go to the project module in the finance system and type my forecast in. That's a hassle because I've now got to go to two systems. The second thing is I've then got the PMO manager coming to me and saying, hey, what's the status of your risks and your issues and all that type of thing? So I'm doing that in the project system. Then the PMO manager says, well, I need a status report that has it all together. So I must go and get some Excel because that's what everyone uses. And I must type the finance data in along with the risks and the issues and the milestones and all that. But, if we let people get away with using a separate project system inside the finance system, they'll also say, well, I've got a separate system on my desktop to manage tasks my way. What do I need your project enterprise approach for? Well, then you're going to have to go and copy the tasks in as well. So we want to bring it all together in terms of reporting. The second thing is we want, in the interest, again, this is all about saving time and effort. Let's not wear our fingers out typing here. We want to have a financial view of a project, as you've seen before. So we could come in and we could, in this case, they ask, this is non-labor costing. They are planning out hardware. So we're forecasting out our hardware, and when the integration runs, we'll get our actuals coming through. So I don't want to have to go and type in as I could do over here. This is too much effort. I don't want to do that. So you won't see this for March yet because March hasn't run. But so let the integration bring it over. You could say, well, you can just put this entire screen could sit inside the finance system. Like, yeah, but now I must go and type the forecast in instead. If I just do the integration, I don't have to type anything in. The second thing is this little yellow bar that's now turned up over there. It is, what about the rest? The rest is I've got resources. So I've got a resource plan. So remember, we've got people involved, and the very often the majority of project cost or typing at least is coming from resource costs. So I've built out a resource plan. I need all these people, all these roles for this amount of time over the months. Well, now I've got to, these people themselves, if I go to Georgia over here, and if, no, let's say Albert will have some costs. If I have some rates, if I go and look at Albert actually has rates associated to him. So I'm able to not go and get his rates in a calculator, go to the resource plan, type it all out, figure it out, then go across to the financial side and type it in there. I don't want to do that. That's way too hard. What I want is to wait a few seconds while what this is doing is it's going and looking, and it's saying, hey, do you have a resource plan? And this little yellow bar will turn up in a second. It's also looking at timesheets. So these actuals, as we get down what's coming in here in a second, as there's integration running in the background here, it is going through and it's saying, okay, there's labor cost. It's going to bring in this labor cost for me. So there's Albert, we looked at earlier. Where did Albert's forecast come from? Well, it comes from here, this new information to report. I can say, hey, I can import these resource forecasts, and what will happen is it will go to the resource plan and we'll say, okay, you've already planned out. If you're planning one, do it once. If you've planned it out, I know who Albert is, I know what he costs, I will then go and put that in for you. In the other way is when we think about actuals, Albert goes and does a timesheet. So Albert's done his timesheets. There could be a difference between what I planned and what he actually did in his timesheet. So if I just look at, to show you what this is about, Albert had time in his timesheets, and that time is money, okay? So if as Albert over here, well, there's a project, there's Pepper. So essentially, Pepper cost that much, and we can see what's coming through from the timesheet, how much this person actually cost versus what was planned versus what they actually did. And if you have different rates, you could work out a margin, etc., if that's the type of thing you're actually doing. So to answer the question, that is essentially why we don't just casually use the project module in the finance tool. We want an integrated view and want to save time. We want everything. It's more to a project than just finance. Now, yes, the finance module in the project module in the finance tool could have a bit more in it. However, you find it doesn't, these things don't go very deep, because if they did, it wouldn't be a finance tool, it'd be a project tool. And once we start getting into the depth of actual project and program portfolio management, we end up then needing everything else in the project tool. So that kind of answers that. Okay, this brings us to the end of the story of integration. How we look, does anyone want to unmute themselves, ask any questions or anything in the chat that hasn't been dealt with?
We do have a question in the chat from Carl. He's asked, can Altus be the source of the budget and forecast if the ERP doesn't have that capability?
Absolutely. So this depends on your process. In your case, your process is that you need Altus to do that, okay? So I'm just going into a project here again. We're seeing a financial view here. It's split by category and subcategory. So think it can be whatever, but generally it's going to be CapEx, OpEx, and that's going to be further broken down. Okay. Now, so like hardware, etc. But these can consist of a budget and a forecast, and then later the actual comes in. The budget can be created here. So you could, when the project starts, you could come in, or pre the project starting even, and say, hey, I need we've got one already, so I just want to save this, hardware budget. And it is because we do, again, it's all about having that central tree structure to relate things to. We have CapEx hardware. This is the admins have set up. Maybe I need some other fields like department or whatever else you need. And then I could say that, well, I have a budget of 100,000. We go, and between there and there, for example, so 29 months, generate that for me. It then splits that budget out for me. You could say, hey, I don't want to do that. Instead, I want to go and I'll create the transactions the way I want them. So when I want to time phase the budget, that will create the budget for you. Just won't save that. So now you've got a budget line. You can then create the cost. So the cost gives us the forecast and also the place for the actual to come in. And we're then able to say, okay, this is I'm buying a Microsoft Surface laptop, and it is going to be against CapEx hardware. So now we've linked the two together. And I'm going to do it specifically on this date, and it's going to cost $2,000. Okay. And then in time, that finance integration runs, it finds it based on a tree structure and a code of some sort, which could be this, or usually there's a project ID from both sides. And it will then say, well, you got it on special for 1,900, and it will put that actual in for you. And then you as a project manager are able to view the variance, etc. So yes, absolutely. Okay, any other questions? How are we doing in the chat over there?
We've got another question from Maggie, and that is, could Altus do financial budgets and forecasts without an allocated project ID framework?
So kind of talking from the top down, is that what you're thinking, Maggie? So we have a budget overall, and then we need to start distributing this down to projects?
She says yes.
Okay. This is done on, we have portfolios and programs. It's typically done on the program. It's this concept of distributing a budget from the top down is something that has been built but not actually come out on the roadmap. So we can definitely talk about this. So yes, it can be done. It's just not out of the box today. Okay. But this will come in time, and it does fit in with a very common process, which is, well, we always talk about strategy, portfolio, program, then project. Well, very often the money starts on the top and works its way down. And along the way, sometimes people say, hey, I had $1 million, Maggie, you got 100,000, and Gemma, you got 100,000 for your project. But halfway through the year, Gemma, sorry, but there's a priority thing going on here. I'm grabbing 20 off you and handing it off to Maggie's project. So this type of thing, we do this for quite a lot of our larger clients. A lot of the government clients do this as well. So yes, it's absolutely possible to do, and more than happy to talk about how to do it. Okay, Gemma, any other questions? If anyone wants to unmute themselves, you're welcome to and ask questions directly. Daniel, I see a hand go up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you were talking about I'm more from a data side, by the way, less about the project side.
Yeah.
With the thing you were describing, it sounds like you've got a particular API endpoint of where it goes on a standard that you guys have created. I know you're saying it's industry standard, but industry standard is always quite flexible. And then you've got where the finance have their standard, and you're going to do a transformation of the data as part of that process. Yes.
Conceptually, yes. We haven't created a specific API for this. What we have done is created a specific a workflow, really, that can connect to whichever API. But when I say we've got to consider Microsoft as well, because our tool is built on top of the Microsoft Power Platform, so on top of the database, etc. It includes APIs. So we can use industry standard. When I say that, I mean we have things like data flow, we have Power Automate, etc. Tools available to us that can connect to your API or your data store or your pick up your file, etc. So that's how we actually do it.
Thinking less about the connectors and more about as in the connections and the interfaces. I was thinking more along the lines of you have a standard of data structure that you guys have built for how the finances need to go into projects. Do you have something that actually demonstrates what that standard is of what the mapping would need to go to?
Nothing I can show you as such, but it's like not now. But basically, it's when we look at like, for example, that project, we look at the finance grid in that, it's sort of telling us the story in that there are multiple tables there, obviously, but it's really budget, forecast, and actual, and that is then broken down further. So we're basically creating the let's just assume that there's a set of finance tables and the rows break it down accordingly. I myself cannot talk about more detail on
no
that.
Worries.
But
yeah, I was just more curious about the actual data structures that it needs to be transformed into. That was all.
It's if you look at it, to be like, yeah, it's a generic finance data structure, which is because finance is finance. So, you know, the one sort of, we had Mark in this one, he'd tell you all about, well, project managers love to think of their own way of doing things, but finance always does it a particular set way. You know, accounting is accounting the world around, and we've just based it on a very standard way to do it. It's not the mapping is not the hard part.
I was thinking about all your financial categories and that type of stuff as well. Is there a standard that you guys are
utilizing,
or is that all configurable?
No, this is purely configurable. So this happens in the
That's the bit I was more trying to work out, like because you're taking a bunch of concepts in a financial system that has been defined by an organization, and then you're going to have to map them somewhere else. So it was a matter of whether or not.
Okay. We set the mapping up in the two different ways. One is here, could be here. So we have categories and subcategories. They get defined here. So we would map to the finance system.
Okay, gotcha. That's the bit I was trying to work out. Is it the transformation about us transforming financial into a standard that you guys have, or is it about we build out the system and it'll all be mapped because like we've already got the structure, we're repeating it.
Exactly. The transformation is about us. We very seldom need the finance tool to do anything except spit data out, and we will take it from there.
Just the transforming process is not really about transforming, so to speak.
No,
it's just a pipeline pass through, and you're mapping the endpoint to the configuration that's needed, where the data is going to end up residing in the tool.
That's basically what it is. Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we got 7 minutes left. Anyone else with any questions?
We do have a few questions in the chat. Ryan, can you see the chat, or do you want me to read them out?
No, I can't. Let me make a plan to see the chat. Okay, where's the chat gone? There's the chat. Oh, there's where that is. Okay. So Gus, okay, we'd like to keep the original budget and separately the current budget. Could you manage this? Yeah, so multiple budgets can be created. So the budgets almost become like baselines. So you would essentially just create another budget there. It does need to be done in a particular way so you don't end up accumulating the budgets. So yes, this has happened for a lot of clients. We also use snapshotting to do this. So at set points or set triggers, we can then write that away. So there are ways to actually do it. Second part of the question, also we handle different types of money. Oh, okay, that does need, I would say, a bit more discussion. Look, I can tell you that there are massive organizations we're doing this for. They've got complicated ways of doing it. So yeah, it can be done. It's a flexible tool. But this to me would essentially be different types of budgets really, and combination of kind of what is the funding source for it, and does like this concept of disappearing it on the 30th of June. So yes, this can be, rules can be built in, which should be added in, but rules could be added in to do this type of thing. Carl is asking about different funding sources. We are able to add funding sources in. So yes, it can be done. We do need to go and add the stuff in to do it. But yes, it's a common thing to do. So you would add funding sources in. You need to then update your reporting as well to track through to make sure that you are reporting it separately. Okay, so Gus, yeah, funding sources, yes, it's a thing. So obviously, you know, quite a few people do need different funding sources created and tracked. We have various approaches to actually do that. So yeah, it can be done. Scrolling up. Okay, Lee is asking, or Violet is asking, can we have a summary page of program financials with multiple projects? Yes, you can. And it would look like this. I'm just going to show you an out of the box one. If you've already got this, the data's in there. The data's in there very detailed way. So we can actually break it down as much as we want in any way we want. So in this case, it's portfolio view that's then rolled up. I could see a program. You're asking about programs. So there's 4 programs here. there's the rolled up financials, and I could then drill into this one. And there's all sorts of other things as well, but here is the program broken down by its different projects, and you can keep going down, down, down to the level of detail that you actually need to go to. So yes, assume you're maintaining this data in the detailed level. We could always roll it up to programs, to portfolios. Okay, let's see what else we have here. So Maggie, okay, you're asking about without the from the top down. Okay, I think we have probably covered off the rest then. Any other questions in the last 4 minutes that anyone's got? If not, thank you all very much for your time. We will let you go. Please go, and if you're depending on what state you're in, please go and enjoy lunch. Quite a few of you had submitted questions, which I've tried to cover off, but there are some sort of specific ones or non-finance related ones that we will get back to you. If you've done that, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat here, or go ahead and just contact us directly, and we will be more than happy to have a chat with you. Thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. So Gemma, any words from you on the next one?
Yeah, I would just like to say we will send the recording out for this meeting this afternoon. In terms of our next Ask an Expert, we haven't 100% confirmed the topic, but we will get that to you guys in the next week or so.
Yeah, and Easter accepting, it will be in about a month's time.
Perfect.
And it'll be something
Thank you, everyone.
exciting. Thanks all. Thanks for coming along. Bye.